Brilliant. Much, and thank you all for coming along to the BIM and Beyond Baltic Tour and being polite enough to listen to me for the next 40 minutes, talking to you a little bit about the importance of education in supporting mega projects and infrastructure within our various countries. Miskimmin. I run the Crossrail-Bentley Information Management Academy in London, but director of the Digital Advancement Academies, which is helping to globally promote and improve asset and BIM knowledge on a worldwide basis. So we've had a long identified problem around within the UK. Since 1934, we've had 29 construction reports that identified this. And one of the ones that came out back in 1998 really solidified this problem within our industry. We need to have a substantial change in culture. Our industry is very risk averse, it's very conservative, it doesn't do innovation particularly well, and it really needs to start changing or we're going to have problems. Here we had another report come out called the Farmer Review, which got a little bit more urgent and a bit more stark with it line that said modernise or die. Really, we are still on this journey of trying to change culture, the education process. So there are three main reactions to change, and I'm sure you can identify with at least one of them. Firstly, we stick our head firmly in the sand. Secondly, embrace change. And thirdly, and I think the most common one here, is scream and run away from change. And we want to make people more interactive with the one in the middle and embrace change so we can change our industry for the better. The industry hasn't really changed for us in the construction world for many thousands of years, through from the Romans, through the medieval castle builders to our Isambard Kingdom Brunel. Methodologies and things that you see there will be very, very similar. So back in 1975, we had a new railway line constructed in London, and what happened there was the methodologies and things that were going on could have been recognised by many of the people who did this back in the medieval era, or perhaps even with the Romans. That was the Victoria line. So let's fast forward quite a few years now until 2007. London needed a new railway, and the Bill of Parliament was passed through the House of Lords in 2007. Thought we would create a brand new railway running from Maidenhead in the west all the way through to Shenfield and Abbey Wood in the east, through and under the City of London. Although there were people who still objected to the railway, and communicated the distinct benefits that we would have within certain areas. And it's quite ironic that they underlined the three key areas, economic, social and environmental, as their objections. And these are the three key areas that were actually providing a really good positive change, the education process that we are delivering and the digital asset challenges and strategies that we are delivering as well. So pause forward a little bit further down the line, and Crossrail will be opening very shortly. Now, it's been extended from not just from Maidenhead, but all the way down to Reading in the west, and now contains over 100 kilometres surface network, 37 upgraded or new stations, 21 kilometres of twin bore tunnel, 19 boroughs of London going through, 8 subsurface station upgrades, 5 main tunnel drives, and 1 world-class railway. And that world-class is very much a state of mind that we're encouraging within the workforce. So the other main benefits that it's driving towards us is not only was it £15.4 billion worth of investment, but it should bring £42 billion worth of benefits back to the UK. It employed 14,000 people at its peak. It will deliver 24 trains an hour once it's opened into the centre of the City of London, and it will add 200 million journeys per year through the city. So some pretty significant statistics there. The timeline, as I said earlier, started around about 2005 as the bill started to pass through. It hit the House of Lords and Parliament in 2007. And during that time, part of our culture changed. The iPhone came along, okay? And I think that impacted heavily on everybody in the room because that started the first bit of the smartphone era. But something even more important happened during that time. 2008, 2009 really impacted on not only what Crossrail did, but also what we did worldwide. And that, of course, was the global economic crisis. Suddenly, governments, projects and organisations had less money to do more with. And to work out how we could understand how we can build ourselves out of those crises, the British government published a document called Plan for Growth, which identified that around about 7% of our gross domestic product in the UK is construction, which is quite a lot. And around about half of that is government-funded construction. So what we're talking about there are things like road, rail, hospitals, schools, prisons, and a lot of the infrastructure behind them. So we needed a strategy. So we published that strategy that really started to change the way we should be doing things in construction. So it said that we needed to deliver fully collaborative 3D BIM with all project asset information, documentation and data being electronic as a minimum by 2016. Now, I have some serious problems with this statement. Firstly, the 3D bit, because BIM really isn't just about 3D pretty pictures, and also the date. That's a very short amount of time to change an industry that has the history that ours has. However, that statement has really kicked off the revolution that we have in the UK. Part of that statement was that we had to get a better deal for the client. We had to get better at procuring our assets. Now, that came in the form of a government document called Soft Landings. It told us all about the fact we have to think about the end user. So people like the maintainer, people like the operator, people like those who drive on the motorway, drink that water, go to that school. Those people are the end users of our assets, and we need to find out what they want and what outcomes they require. We have to have people who take responsibility for information. So that GSL champion is the government soft landings, but it's a BIM champion, an information champion, if you will. It's to encourage people to take responsibility for their information. If I sold you some information but took no responsibility for it, would you trust it? Would you buy it? Probably not. So to get the efficiencies and the benefits we want out of this digital revolution, we've got to make sure people take responsibility for the information that they generate. We needed also to make sure people understood how to do outcome-driven procurement. So a good example of this is the Rolls-Royce engines. They don't sell engines. What they do is they sell pounds of thrust per minute in the air, which means that they have to generate a very good quality product to continually earn money over the next 20, 30, 40 years, the life cycle of that particular engine. But what it does mean for the client is they get a good quality engine. If it breaks down, Rolls-Royce is losing money. So therefore, the people who come and fix it have to arrive quickly and get it back in the air very soon. And also for maintenance, it's got to be easy and quick to maintain with the maintenance staff there ready to go. So Rolls-Royce aren't losing money by not having the engine in the air. And so the client is getting the outcome that they require. Think about how you can extrapolate that down onto a railway or into a water purification plant, or perhaps onto a road or a school or a prison, etc. So the targets we really need to think about are ones that help us to positively impact society, the economy, and the environment. And finally, what it's talking about is getting us away from thinking just purely in construction and design terms, but thinking of that whole life cycle. How do we commission both the physical and the digital asset to make sure it's fit for purpose? Talking to those end users and finding, when we hand that information over, is it information that they can consume? Is it the information that they need? Not necessarily what we think they want. And then also training them to use not only the physical asset, but also the digital asset behind it. How often have you been given a piece of software and no training and found that it becomes increasingly difficult to actually deliver that? So all these changes happened right in the middle of the Crossrail story. And so when Andrew Wolstenholme was made aware of these, he made that statement that he would embrace these changes and use Crossrail as a major beacon project that allowed other people to learn from it. So as we went through and new things happened, he adopted those standards. 2011, the Government Construction Strategy, the PAS Part 2, which is the CapEx Information Management, the Part 3, the OpEx Information Management, and the Part 5 for the security, as we go forward through that life cycle into the future and to the delivery at the end of next year. The Crossrail is a very complex environment. So it's made up of around about 220 different contracts and JVs, all needing to interface with each other and all needing to have that complex coordination, cooperation, and communication together in one place. Otherwise, the risk of delivering it is quite significant. Add that, the data complexity. So this is a cross-section of one of the stations. Each of the different coloured boxes is a different contract. So each of these different boxes needs to interface with each other and generate information to the same standards using the same unit, the same methodologies, the same focus and the same understanding of what information is required. So it is a very complex environment to work with. So to do that and to deliver the two assets that needed to be produced, the physical and the digital, Crossrail worked on the case that they would have many different technology platforms and they had to put a layer of a warehouse or a lake over the top of that to extract that information from, so they could spend less time and effort and money integrating systems and allowing information to be the key within that. All of that, of course, is absolutely possible without a good BIM strategy. So what is that BIM strategy? So I'm sure most of you in the room will have come across one of these before. It's an ink blot. And people use ink blots to understand what people's brains and minds are thinking. I liken ink blot very much, BIM to the ink blot, in the fact that when we look at BIM, we all have a different perspective, we all have a different interpretation. And that interpretation is based on our knowledge, our skills, our experience, our needs. And what we need to do to get everybody focused into the same interpretation is to start bringing people together and educate them into what we need them to interpret BIM is to deliver a Crossrail. So of course we know what it isn't, and we know it isn't a document sitting on its own. We know it's not an isolated drawing or a VR file. We know it's not a video. We know it's not a piece of metadata or a single asset. We know it's not a 3D pretty picture or a bit of clash detection, a bit of GIS, a sensor or a checklist. But it is a combination of all of these things interacting with each other and ensuring that we have a holistic view on all the information that affects our decisions within our portfolio of assets. And Crossrail really needed to get that information across to everybody and get people to understand that it's the I in the middle that's important. Not the buildings, not the modelling, but the information that was required. And we all know that BIM is made up of three different things. It is processes and standards, it is technologies that help us to deliver that, and it's also people. And people really are the key to all of this. People are your biggest asset, but if you handle them badly, they are also your biggest liability. Whether that's the person out on the construction site, whether it is the document controller, the IT or CAD technician, whether it's the project manager or the financial controller, or perhaps even the person who just needs to get on and maintain it. Each of them have a different set of needs, knowledge, experience, requirements, and a different direction. And we need to focus all these people together so they have a common interpretation about what is required. So back in August 2012, as the Olympic Games were going on, it was identified within Crossrail that all these various people were not focusing and interpreting things the same way. They had good processes, they had good software, but they had not engaged people in the right way, and so therefore £15 billion worth of railway was a considerable risk. So two people got together. How can we solve this? The first one was Andrew Wolstenholme, who was the CEO of Crossrail at the time, and he really wanted some sort of academy to support the government construction strategy and also make sure that there was a lasting legacy of best practice delivered. He talked to my boss, Greg Bentley, who really understood that we've got to start working smarter together, getting everybody, not just the client and the tier one contractor, but also all the way down through the supply chain, getting people to talk together, to collaborate, to cooperate, to communicate, and to coordinate their efforts to help us to deliver something that was world class. So, as we said, once that idea had gone through their minds, on the 1st of October 2012, we opened the doors of the London Crossrail-Bentley Information Management Academy and started to help educate the workforce in Crossrail and also anybody around the world who wanted to come and visit and understand not only what Crossrail was doing, but also what the rest of the world was doing and to share their knowledge. And after all this time, I've become less of a civil engineer, which is my background, and become more of a psychological engineer, because understanding human nature is key to helping us to change people. So I was given 3 statements to help us run the Crossrail Academy. Firstly, that we needed to enhance the supply chain knowledge and drive BIM into their common practices. We needed to deliver a Crossrail curriculum that gave them a flavour of the people, the processes and the technologies, and some industry best practice that they needed to deliver the world-class railway. And thirdly, what they wanted to do was to make sure all the lessons that they'd learnt weren't lost on Crossrail, but handed over to anybody who wanted to learn them, and also for the knowledge that they had to be shared back into Crossrail. It's a very open and honest sharing regime that we had in the Academy and that we have in the Academy now as we move forward from Crossrail. So when you're doing this and when you're educating people, there are 4 main things that you need to convey. If you don't get these right, then it's time to pack up and go home. Firstly, what is the bigger picture? People need to understand the goals, the objective, the vision, the bigger thing that we're trying to deliver as a team. And then they need to understand where they fit in that bigger picture. Why should I carry out my bit unless I know that it helps to achieve that bigger picture, that goal and that vision? And then finally, because we're all human, what's in it for me? How do I get something out of this? Win me over, convince me that there's a benefit in doing this thing for me specifically, and then help them through that day-to-day change, coach them through what needs to be done, and then help them by listening to their concerns and perhaps modifying processes or standards or whatever it might be to help them to integrate and make it a better place. So what did we deliver in the Academy? Well, we looked at awareness briefings to make sure everybody who joined the Crossrail project was fully aware of not only what processes and standards and methodologies were required, but also of how they could interface with everybody else within the project. We supplied a coaching facility, allowing people to coach people through a day-to-day process, helping to reduce that impact. We also provided a sandbox environment that helped them to integrate new technologies and try out new innovations. Nobody likes to be the first mouse, because the first mouse normally gets their head caved in. So we needed a safe, friendly environment for people to try new stuff out. And then we gave them an education and engagement opportunity to give them a platform to talk to the rest of the world. So those awareness briefings, initially we did them once a contract has been awarded, and that would have been the project management team coming in. So it would be the project manager, the document controller, the CAD lead, the asset manager, the field engineer, the middle management, as it were, for that area. So they could disseminate this message further down. We also made sure that we brought in the BIM managers from that particular contractor. Why? Because it's the BIM manager who would have bid on the digital asset side of things, but then will probably not be involved in the delivery. But we want them to be able to support their teams. So just stepping back a bit from there, that was when people were awarded a contract and they came on board. We now understand that what we should have done was we should have done that earlier, before people even bid on a contract, to explain what your obligations might be, what you need to think about in your delivery, and also what kind of technologies and how you should be responding to that bid in the first place. And at the end of the project, we will have a debrief on the lessons learned. So the sessions included the Crossrail BIM vision, dealing with the document management, the CAD modeling management, the asset management, the handover, and the BIM in delivery. Now, BIM in delivery is quite an interesting one, in that everybody was spending a lot of time and effort collecting information, managing information, and ensuring that information was good. But what we wanted to do was to give contractors additional potential for that information, that they could reuse it and get more benefit and potentially more economic value from that information within their own activities. So some really nice innovations and knowledge sharing in that area. What was nice with the way Crossrail started to talk to people was it broke it down into some really easy ways of communicating. If you don't create a common understanding and you don't communicate that clearly, you've got trouble. So one of the really nice ways that I saw Crossrail deliver this is in the way they created and that they explained the common data environment. And they explained it along the terms of iTunes. So in iTunes, you have albums, okay, and that album contains lots of information. Not only does it contain the geometry of the song, but it also contains all the metadata behind each of those songs. Those albums are uploaded into your common data environment, your iTunes as such, and they're stored in a flat, open database that you can see all the metadata, you can sort through things, you can search on things, you can create things from that. And then we produce those sets of songs into playlists. And you might have a playlist for jogging, and you might have a playlist for doing the gardening. But in the Crossrail world here, we have a playlist for a construction activity, or an operations activity, or something to do with maintenance. So we're not copying information time and time again. What we're doing is creating that playlist that extracts information out from that common data environment. And it was explanations like these that really helped people to understand what was going on in the Crossrail world. So the Academy itself, and I've got to admit this is quite an old photograph, I must update it at some point, had a series of pods around its walls, and we had sandbox servers of the Crossrail environments. And what that allowed us to do was to coach people through on a day-to-day basis what they were up to. So what we might have is a pod that had information from the client itself. This is what you might receive as part of your bid. Then you would have information on these are the design criteria that you need to carry out. Then it might go through the design things on the MEP or the civils or the architectural or the structural, gathering information as we go. Perhaps the sequencing next, and then what does it look like in handover? What should your data be like before it's handed back to Crossrail? And then finally, what would that look like in operations and maintenance in the future? So people can see where they fit into that bigger picture, into that timeline, and they can be coached through their day-to-day processes and understand how their information and the delivery of that information impacts on the other people within that organisation. So one of the other nice things that we did within there was to support the innovations program called Innovate 18. Now, Innovate 18 was a platform that allowed organisations to share innovative ideas and not keep them to themselves. So basically all of the Crossrail contractors could use those ideas and get funding to deploy them if required. And having the laboratory type environment, the sandbox environment in the Academy was very useful to be able to bring in new things and trial them against what was going on in the real world. One of the really important influential things that we did was to set up audiences with Crossrail leadership. So leaders from major infrastructure owners from around the world could fly into London and spend a day in the academy listening to what Crossrail firstly had to say, and then having a discussion so they could exchange information and best practices and knowledge from their own experience of digital assets, and then create that lasting relationship between the major players for infrastructure around the world, which was very, very good indeed. And that information has been invaluable as we move forward into other projects. So the Academy at the moment had lots of people from all around the world coming to visit it. All the countries coloured red on this particular map are those who come to visit the London Academy to see Crossrail and to talk to myself and the team in the Academy. We're expanding that at the moment with similar Academy in Houston, in Dubai, in Pune, in India, in Beijing, in Sydney, and in Singapore. Each of those locations will have a high-definition television studio in them, which will allow each location to broadcast direct to the other. And so we can now, instead of just sharing information from a single point, share information on a global basis. It's all about creating that lasting legacy of best practice that Andrew Wolstenholme talked about. Now, we look at the whole thing being a baton race, a relay race, if you will. Okay. Now, the Olympic Games in Terminal 5 at Heathrow ran with the baton for a little while. They passed that baton of knowledge over to Crossrail 1, who are now passing that baton over to HS2, Crossrail 2, Tideway Tunnels, and other projects around the world. So making sure that this race of knowledge never finishes. So at the moment within the Academy, I have a remit from my boss, Greg, which is the envy of anybody around the world. It's just very plain and simple. It is do the right thing. So what I feel is the right thing is to support the UK drive for level 2 BIM and beyond, but also to support on a global basis people's desire to do better information management. And to do that, we have really good relationships with people like the Major Projects Association, who use the Academy for their events, the UK BIM Alliance, who we're working with on an education programme, the BIM regions, who can use the location to broadcast out to the rest of the world, the Innovations Programme, Commit, that can deal with the drone, the virtual reality, and the RFID in the technology world, and things like the Chartered Institute of Building, who wish to use that as a meeting place to allow us to exchange information across organisations and industries. So next year, as Crossrail starts to come to an end, we are producing some courses, free courses that will be delivered out of the London Academy and also the academies around the world, completely software agnostic, and they are covering things like BIM Essentials, things like security with your digital assets, benchmarking, financing, contracts, legal education side, securing and insuring your assets, a whole set of really good courses which are going to be delivered for free to help change the way that people understand BIM and the digital asset. We've been involved in lots of things over the years. Back in 2012, we put 8 pillars in the ground and said, these are the main things that you need to achieve for BIM. What are the standards? And over the last 6 years, we have seen standards come along that help achieve those. So whether they're standards for collaboration, ones for electronic data management, CapEx information management, OpEx information management, information security, information exchange, outcomes and outcome procurement, and all the other standards that we need to have to define information, and whether that's uniclass, whether that's asset data dictionaries, etc., as we go through. The other things that we do within there, we talk a lot to clients, and so the top 3 things that you need to understand when you're putting your asset portfolio together is to understand asset breakdown structure, relation to impacts, asset tagging strategy, and information requirements. So we need to look also at things like full life cycle thinking, which is one of the key things in the Academy at the moment, making sure people understand that it's not just throwing information at each other, it's a constant conversation, and it starts way before you've even thought about constructing something or designing something. It happens during operations when you're monitoring function and performance, and you're looking at your maintenance regime. And if the 2 of those work fine, you don't need to do much. But if there's a problem, you need to be collecting information and monitoring it and working out what the outcomes you need to achieve are. So then when you come to the strategy and you're imagining a need, you can start gathering information about what you might need to do. Then when you're communicating that need, what information is required there, how people will fulfill that need, creating the concepts, creating the design information, and when we get to construction, what products or equipment or services we might need to fulfill the functions that we thought about and generated by the information that we've got so far. And so we take that all the way through, even to areas like disaster, which not many people cover in their data drops and in their information packages. What happens in a flood? What happens if there's a fire? What happens if there is a business disaster or you're attacked by some sort of cyber terrorism? So we've got to really understand all of that and have a better life cycle thinking. We also looked at a lot of new thinking in the Academy, how perhaps we would connect the new how we might potentially connect a single asset to society. So bear with me on this one, it's quite new thoughts. Taking crash barrier that impacts on a lane, which impacts on a bridge, which impacts on a junction. And that junction is important for the road network. The road network is run by an organisation that has a strategy and objectives and funding given to it by government. If something happens to that crash barrier, it impacts on the lane, the bridge, the junction, the network, and causes that will impact on businesses, because people will sit in the traffic jam, they won't be earning money, which means they won't be making profit, which means they won't be paying taxes. They'll also be sitting potentially in that traffic jam in the evening, which means they won't be able to get home to their families and take an active participant in society and in their communities. So therefore we have a social impact. And also sitting in a traffic jam with the engine running or driving an extra 30 miles around the outside will have a pollution or environmental impact. And what we're working at the moment is ways of being able to qualify that, to quantify it, to measure it and monitor it, and then being able to feed that back into how much money we should be spending on gathering information about our assets to ensure our digital assets. Looking at standards leadership, looking at new thought ways of delivering things, and helping to support new innovations. Getting involved in pilot projects, proving the return on investment within those assets. So how much have we actually reached? So worldwide, around about 5,600 people, 48 different countries. Most of the people that come through an academy environment have been governments, major projects, owners and contractors, but it's open to all sorts of people. And that it's actually, we've been able to conduct away sessions in 16 different countries as well. So why did we do it? What did we achieve? We educated the supply chain, we briefed them on the vision, we explained the contractual obligations, helped them comply with requirements, and helped them mainly to understand why they were doing something in the first place. Everybody needs to know why. Coaching and educating, showing them how to use systems, how to take through processes and workflows, how to experiment and sandbox, how to take advantage of new technologies and assess the impact of new standards within your processes. And in the end, it was all about mitigating risks. Certainly, the quotes from Crossrail tell us that without educating their supply chain and without keeping everybody on a focused, common interpretation of BIM, the project itself would have been not only under risk, but would have come in at a considerably higher cost and considerably later than we anticipated to be delivered. So I think I've stuck within my 40 minutes, so I will stop there and say thank you very much for inviting me along to speak to you today, and hopefully there might be some questions fed back to me at a later time. So thank you very much.